You're listening to 10,000 Worlds, written and read by Weston Gill. That's me. Chapter 31, Progress. Vuet's fur was falling away in tufts that drifted to the floor. Her body rippled beneath her skin, muscles twisting, bones cracking with an effort of change. She was constantly adjusting her position and twisting strangely to accommodate rapid growth. "You sure this is necessary?" she asked, her voice already shifting, less growl, more music. "You'll need to blend in," Ryland said, tapping something on a datapad without looking up. "Fair skin, human proportions. The world I seeded isn't exactly welcoming of the unusual. So, racists?" Vuet muttered, wincing as her tail retracted into her spine slowly. "Insulated," Ryland corrected. "Primitive, easily startled." Her ears shrank next, slowly replaced by rounded human ones that felt alien to her own head. "I could have gone my whole life without feeling startled by my own anatomy." "That's progress," Ryland offered dryly. She gave him a glare that might have killed a lesser being. "You've been saying that for 20 years. "It's true every time I say it," he replied, the faintest smirk tugging at his lips. Vuet rolled her eyes and shook her arms out, her hands still more paw than palm. "I swear, Ryland, if this doesn't work, I'm haunting you through every dimension." He looked up then, really looked at her. "If you can manage that, you have finally outgrown me, in alteration at least." That earned a small, bitter laugh, even as her skin continued to ripple, fur giving way to thin, smooth sheen. She leaned against the wall, half human, half creature, breathing hard. "You've gotten better," Ryland said, tone gentler now. "I've had practice," she replied, flexing her fingers. "How long has it been since we started this? 2 decades at least?" "Closer to 3, Ryland said absently, eyes on the holographic projection hovering over the table. "Sanctuary's calendar has a way of making time feel negotiable." Vuet tilted her head. "You mean the constant experiments, explosions, and impossible errands made you lose track?" He chuckled softly. "Something like that." They both fell silent for a time, the hum of their machinery and the faint whisper of transformation filling the space. Vuet finally spoke again, quieter. "You ever think we're the only ones who even remember what we're doing and why we're doing it?" Ryland didn't answer immediately. "I think that's the cost of working in theory," he said at last. "Everyone else deals in results, especially the Shapers." Her fur was nearly gone. The patches of exposed skin gleamed under the workshop lights, thin, luminous, more human than she'd expected. "You make it sound noble," she said, half amused, half bitter. He set the datapad aside and leaned on the table, studying her. "You've been by my side through every failure, Vuet. That's more than noble." He laughed softly. "Flattery won't make me forgive you for ignoring me the last time the lab caught fire. It was a controlled combustion. It burned my eyebrows off." "You're growing new ones now," Ryland said, utterly serious. Vuet snorted. "You're impossible. And yet, you're still here." Her movements slowed as the changes settled. Her shoulders narrower, her neck longer, her tail gone completely. She stretched, testing the new balance in her weight. Her hands still bore the faint three-toed structure of her kind, her feet padded and wide, but the rest of her looked human enough to pass in dim light. "Almost," Ryland said. "The hands especially. Humans notice hands. I'll keep them gloved. Good shoes for the feet. Clothing mandatory there. It's social expectation more than law. Humans sound exhausting. Humans are exhausting." "Then you'll fit right in," Ryland said. Vuet rolled her shoulders and stretched again. "I still don't understand why you're making me do this now." "Because we're close," Ryland said, voice distant. "Closer than we've ever been. The shield is nearly ready. The calibrations are stable. The next test requires a world like theirs. Dense, woven magic hidden beneath a veneer of science." She turned toward him. "You already found it?" He nodded. "Years ago. I seeded it for the Shapers to find. They'll think it's their own discovery." "Years ago?" She blinked. "And you're only telling me now?" Ryland looked suddenly older, more tired. "You'd have stopped me." "You're damn right I would have. Should have." Silence again, heavy, but not hostile. Vuet let out a long, slow breath. "Then show me. I'll attune to it. You'll need me to know the way." "Now?" She smirked. "You always said there's no time like the present." He hesitated. "It won't be like Sanctuary." "It doesn't have to be," she said. "Nothing ever is." Ryland nodded slowly, his expression softening. "You've changed more than your shape, Vuet." 15 years of living in your shadow will do that. He laughed quietly, shaking his head. You've surpassed my shadow, famous here as I am, more in certain circles. She stepped close enough he could see the faint shimmer of her new skin, the ghost of fur beneath. Don't make me regret it. You won't, he said, her voice gentled, losing its edge. You've said that before. I've meant it then, too. She exhaled through a laugh. I'm going to need new clothes. More than clothes, Ryland replied. Almost nothing from Sanctuary will pass there, Vuet frowned. You're joking. Sanctuary has everything. He pulled open a case, revealing a folded set of silver and black robes. Old Shaper garb. They'll suit our needs enough. Vuet grimaced. Those are hideous. Functional, Ryland corrected. Woven and enchanted. You'll thank me later. I'll thank you when they stop itching. He smiled. The magic is woven tightly. It'll be years before the Shapers find this new world. Decades, maybe. Vuet stretched her limbs again, feeling the strange lightness of her human body. You and your decades. 2 or 3 at most, barely a blink. Really depends on how you spend them, she said softly. He looked at her then, really looked, and his face fell. I'm sorry. Don't be, she said, straightening. Just be aware of your words. Her movement became more graceful, almost feline, despite the human frame. Ryland watched, impressed. You're adapting quickly. I spent a long time learning to survive, she said. The rest is just application. He nodded once. How long till you're ready? She glanced toward the window where Sanctuary's light shimmered through glass. If it's just passing, a few hours. If you want me to be human, she sighed. A day, maybe 2. Just focus on the movements, the speech. The rest will pass unnoticed. We'll finish preparations and go when you're ready. Then it's settled, she said, the last traces of fur vanishing from her as her skin smoothed. Tomorrow, we save the world. Tonight, you buy me dinner. This is hungry work. Ryland smiled. Chapter 32. The Dark. Jake woke to the sound of someone moaning down the hall. At first, he thought it was his mother talking in her sleep, until the bathroom light blinked out, and the world went black. He blinked. The air felt heavy, too cold to be real, too solid to be a dream. Then the floor fell away beneath him. He was floating, high above Rancho, watching as the electric lights of the city winked out one by one. Every house, every street, swallowed by an ocean of darkness. The kind that devoured sound, the kind that remembered him. All at once, he knew what it was. Ghent. Jake didn't want to find him, didn't want to think his name, but his mind reached out anyway. Something in him, that cursed thread between them, pulled taut. His vision cut through miles in a heartbeat, skipping over rooftops and rivers until it stopped above a blue-gray apartment complex on a mountain's edge. Ghent was there. Jake felt him like a migraine behind his eyes. Hello, Jacob. The voice crawled through his mind, slow and pleased. I hope you're ready for a show. Jake's pulse stuttered. He searched the shadows, but the detective wasn't visible. It was the darkness. A shape inside a shape. A grin waiting to happen. Jake's vision drifted towards a familiar building, an apartment he'd been watching almost constantly for more than a day. His heart nearly stopped. He recognized the layout, the color, the curtains. No, please, no. Inside, 3 people froze in fear. A plant mage, an earth mage, and the ethereal girl. Hank, Adam, and Liz. Jake screamed into the void. Run! Run, please! His voice cracked in the real world, echoing off the bedroom walls. He bolted upright, drenched in sweat. Run! Ghent's laughter slithered through the dark. Too late for that, little mages. The temperature dropped like the plummet of a stone into a bottomless canyon. Jake watched from his mind's eye as the frost bled over the apartment windows. Hank and Adam stood shoulder to shoulder facing the door. Hank glanced back at Liz, fear carved deep into his face. Run, Hank whispered. Liz's gaze flickered to the balcony. 2nd floor, no escape. Then she saw it, that smile, pressing against the glass of the sliding door. Ghent slammed into the apartment. The whole unit shuddered, walls and floors shaking from the blow. The deepest sound boomed from the front door. Jake clutched his hair, his own breath ragged. Please, run, please. Another crash. Wood cracked. The doorframe splintered. Adam moved first. He grabbed a red lamp from the end table, his attunement flaring as the silica twisted and hardened around his arm, reshaping it into a jagged gauntlet that reached his elbow. Hank followed, breath steaming as a nearby snake plant shot upward in a burst of green, and then the door exploded inward. Ghent stepped through, but he wasn't a man anymore. He was a shadow draped over flesh, a grin floating in the black. His eyes gleamed like wet metal in the half-light. The snake plant froze mid-growth, barely double its size, the green crystallizing into a white frost. Adam staggered back into the wall. Hank grabbed his shoulders, both trembling, both hopeless, small. Liz couldn't move at all. Terror had her rooted to the spot. Jake's tears blurred his vision. His voice broke into a whisper. Run, please, just run. Ghent floated forward, feet never touching the ground. The air thickened, ink-black tendrils spilling across the floor and walls like oil in space. Adam yelled and lunged, but he barely took a step before the shadows reached him. They coiled around his body, twisting, shredding, peeling him out of existence. The sound was wet, wrong, flesh and soul being unmade. Ghent shuddered with pleasure, his eyes rolling back, mouth split too wide to be human. Adam didn't even have time to scream. Jake's body convulsed. He fell to his knees, sobbing in the dark. Stop! Please stop. Please don't let this be happening. Then warm hands were on him, his mother's voice cutting through the terror. Oh, baby, what's wrong? It's just a dream, sweetheart. It's just a dream. She brushed his hair from his face as he shook, unable to answer, unable to believe her, because it wasn't a dream. The darkness wouldn't vanish. It just waited, smiling and brimming with malice. Chapter 33. Run. Liz's eyes locked on the living shadow that squeezed her heart like a vice. For a heartbeat that stretched to an eternity, none of them moved. The world had gone cold, but she barely felt it. Ghent's monstrous grin gleamed in the dark. Hank stood frozen beside her. Time refused to bend until he did. Hank turned and shoved Liz hard toward the bedroom. "Ah!" was all he managed. Before the sound was cut off in a wet, sucking slurp, the shadows swallowing him whole just as they had Adam. He was simply gone. Liz hit the floor, pain and terror snapping her into motion. She scrambled up and ran for the back of the apartment. The window ahead, a faint outline of moonlight cutting through the darkness. Nowhere to go, Ghent's voice crooned behind her, Flick amused and far too close. Liz didn't think. She inhaled sharply, reaching for the weightless flicker of her gift. The way she could turn her body into something less solid, less real. She threw herself forward, mid-breath, phasing through the wall and bursting into open air, 15 feet above the ground. The world slammed back into focus an instant before she hit. Her right foot took the full force, an explosion of pain snapping up her leg. Her knee caught rock, her shoulder slammed into a bush, and the pine-sharp branches tore at her arms and face as she tumbled. When she looked back, the awful smile glowed faintly in the window above, watching, waiting. Liz dragged herself out of the branches and limped forward, each step a jagged throb of agony. The air was cool, mercifully clean, but her body screamed with every motion. She stumbled across the parking lot towards the line of garages, half hopping, half crawling, her breath coming in short, panicked gasps. Don't look back, don't look back. But she did. Nothing. The dark behind her was silent, still. She felt it, the creeping chill that always came before Ghent appeared. The air thickened, the temperature dropped. She pressed her hands against the nearest garage door and shoved herself through, finding the weightlessness again, just enough for her to slip inside. She fell, dragged herself across cold concrete, wedged beneath a vehicle parked there. Her leg burned like fire, deep, pounding, relentless. She tried to pull it closer, but it refused to move. Her hands scrabbled weakly at the floor, leaving smears of blood and dirt as she pressed herself tighter into the narrow space she couldn't see. The air under the car grew colder by the second. Metal chilled her skin. Her breath trembled in uneven hitches as she clamped both hands over her mouth to muffle the sound. Tears slipped down her cheeks unchecked. Any moment now, she thought, the garage door would lift. He'll be there. She squeezed her eyes shut and prayed for anything, for light, for safety, for this to end. Time blurred, fear dulled into exhaustion. The pounding in her leg and chest began to fade, if only slightly, and in that shrinking, shivering space beneath heartbeats, Liz slipped away into unconsciousness. Chapter 34, The World I Chose. I walked beside Ryland through the sleepless city. The lamps above glowed the color of dying stars, dull, indifferent, buzzing faintly with wasted power. Filth collected in the gutters, paper cups and half-eaten food decomposing together in a slurry that smelled like neglect. The world pulsed with noise, but felt hollow, as if the people who built it had forgotten how to live inside of it. Vuet wrinkled her nose and sniffed the air. For once she was grateful for her human body dulled senses. This place is horrible, she said. Ryland didn't disagree. You've barely seen it, he answered. I don't know if I want to, she muttered. Ryland sighed. We have to save this world, Vuet. Not from itself. That might be impossible, but from the Shapers at least. Vuet stopped, watching a rat skitter between overflowing trash bins. If you can't save it from itself, she said, then why bother saving it at all? The Shapers need to be stopped, he answered. His tone was hollow. He started walking again, his boots slapping against the cracked pavement. They destroy worlds because they can. They stepped from an alley into a wider street, and the light grew brighter, but no kinder. A few people hurried past, wrapped in blissful ignorance of the world around them. A man slept against the wall of a stone building, wrapped in a blanket that smelled like old rain and sickness. Around him, the glass towers of wealth reflected his misery, without noticing. Vuet stared. Why does he sleep outside when there is more than enough space next to him? Ryland's jaw tightened, because their society isn't built to care. Their pride won't let them, and their greed refuses to make room. There are good people here, more than you'd think, but the system they built feeds on exhaustion. It eats empathy right out of them. Vuet's eyes lingered on the man. How many live like this? Countless, Ryland said softly. A disease they all pretend not to see. He met her gaze. You've never seen a primitive world like this, have you? Vuet shook her head. I've barely read about them. I didn't think it was this sad. He pulled her away gently but firmly. Come on, if you stay too long, it starts to hurt. They walked in silence until Vuet finally asked, Then tell me something good about them, anything. Ryland hesitated. His expression softened, though his voice didn't. Even here, there are people who give everything they have to others, teachers who feed hungry children from their own pockets, nurses who work until their hands bleed, artists who make beauty out of pain. They're the only reason this society hasn't collapsed completely on itself. Vuet smiled faintly. So they still care? Some do, he admitted. But caring here is costly. Their lives are built on sand, endless work, endless hunger for more. Their faiths are strange little refuge. They gather in buildings, sing songs to invisible gods, and tell each other they're not alone. He paused. Maybe that's the only magic they have left. They worship God? Vuet asked, her voice filled with childlike awe. I've read about it, but never believed people still did. Ryland's face darkened. My world worshipped gods once, before we built the roads to others. Sanctuary has idols too, not statues, but power, knowledge, and comfort. Worship takes many forms. Vuet frowned. But you know what lies beyond. You've seen more than any of them. Why lie to them or yourself about what's real? Ryland gave a short, humorless laugh. Because truth doesn't comfort anyone. They need hope more than they need knowledge. Hope is the drug that keeps their world alive. Vuet looked skyward, where the faint glow of pollution hid the stars. Then, at least they still have hope. That's something. Ryland said nothing for a long while. When he spoke again, his voice was quieter, almost uncertain. They do love fiercely, I'll give them that. They make families, they sacrifice, they dream, even the broken ones. Sometimes, they try to save others from breaking too. He shook his head. I don't know why I still find that impressive. Vuet smiled, but it was tinged with sorrow. Maybe because it's the best thing about them? She said hopefully. They walked until the high towers gave way to narrow roads and quiet homes. Neon bled into the distance. Ryland finally stopped, staring at the dark horizon. "The Shapers will come," he said. "They'll seem like gods to this world's people, and the people will worship them. And when the Shapers leave, this world will be ash. But they'll have their converts, lost, eager, and powerful, a cycle feeding itself forever." Vuet's chest tightened. "Then why are we fighting at all?" Ryland turned to her. "Because someone has to," his voice wavered. "And because I once believed every world could be saved. I just don't believe this one can. Not anymore." They stood in silence. The only sound was a persistent hum of distant civilization. Vuet studied him and then spoke softly. "You're leaving me here, aren't you?" Ryland nodded. "You need to see them as they are, to understand them, maybe even love them." His expression hardened again. "And when you do, you'll tell me that they're worth saving, and hopefully I can save them." Vuet's eyes went wide. Ryland, but he was already fading, slipping through the veil between worlds. The air shivered where he'd stood. Vuet clenched her fists, furious and heartbroken. "I will haunt you, Ryland," she whispered, "until you remember why you ever cared." Chapter 35. Escape. Liz woke shivering on cold concrete, her body aching and her mind blank. For a long, suspended moment, she didn't know where she was, or who she was. Darkness pressed close from every side, dense and absolute. Panic bloomed in her chest. She clawed at the air, at the ground, at anything solid, desperate to find space to breathe. The air was cold and stale. Something heavy loomed inches above her. Buried alive. Her breath came in sharp, ragged gasps as she tried to push herself free. Her fingers met metal instead of dirt, a smooth, freezing surface. The panic shifted, then slowly began to ease as her brain caught up to her body. Her memory returned in fragments, the running, the screaming, the fall, Ghent. She wasn't buried. She was under something large. Liz moved one hand and then the other, finding the familiar cold curve of a car bumper. She was in a garage, alive, somehow. Her right leg pulsed with sharp, stabbing pain every time she shifted, and the rest of her body burned with smaller injuries, scratches, cuts, bruises. The ache was grounding, a reminder that she had survived. She pressed herself upright, using the car for balance. Her legs screamed in protest, refusing to hold her weight, but she managed to hobble to the workbench in the back of the garage. The air smelled faintly of old dust. Metal tools gleamed faintly in the ghost light seeping through the cracks of the garage door, and beneath it all, she could feel him. Ghent, the same freezing dread coiled around her heart, radiating through her veins. It wasn't imagination, it was presence, his presence. She backed away from the door on instinct, her body trembling, her breath barely under control. Then she pushed. Her body phased through the workbench, through the concrete wall, through the layers of brick and air until she stumbled into the open night. The moon hung dim behind thin clouds, offering only the faintest light. The world was quiet, too quiet. Every sound, every shift of air felt like it could be him. She limped through the rocks and sparse shrubs, her ankle on fire with pain. Her knee throbbed where it had been slammed into the ground during her fall. The cold night air bit at her lungs, but she welcomed it. It meant she was alive. When she reached the end of the row of garages, she crouched low and peered into the dark parking lot. The silence felt wrong. Cars lined the spaces, but no one moved. No lights, no voices, just dead, sleeping world. Her body ached to stop, to collapse, but the memory of that grin drove her forward. She half hobbled, half dragged herself to her car, every sound amplified by fear. Her keys slipped from her trembling fingers once, twice, before she managed to press the fob. Her horn blared, the alarm splitting the night like a scream. She silenced it in an instant, heart hammering so fast she thought it might kill her. She slid into the driver's seat and jammed the keys into the ignition. The engine turned over, sputtering, then caught. She slammed the door shut, locked it, breathing like a drowning woman clawing for air. Only after she'd driven a full mile did she let herself start to believe that she was safe. Her knuckles were wide on the steering wheel, her leg throbbed with every vibration of the car and press of the gas. She couldn't think, couldn't process. She just drove. When headlights flashed in the opposite lane, her vision blurred, her eyes stung with tears she couldn't stop. The world smeared together, light, dark, pain, fear. And by the time she reached the old trailhead, she could barely tell how long she'd been driving at all. She parked crookedly across spaces, hands still gripping the wheel. Her heart was beating too fast, too hard. The adrenaline had nowhere to go now. It was just trapped inside of her, fuel that would not burn. She wanted to call someone, anyone, but her phone was gone. Or maybe she dropped it, maybe Ghent had it. The thought was too heavy to finish. So she curled into the driver's seat, one arm over her chest, the other over her bad leg. The tears came silently at first, then in trembling waves. By the time exhaustion dragged her under, her breath had evened out into soft, broken sobs, and the moon had already climbed high above the mountains, watching her sleep. Chapter 36. The Race. Jake's mother had held him for nearly an hour. She rocked and whispered and smoothed his hair while he cried into her shoulder until the sobs came dry and silent. Eventually he went still, not asleep, but pretending. He lingered a little longer before easing off the bed and slipping quietly out of the room. The house exhaled into stillness. Jake lay motionless, eyes open, staring at nothing. His heart thudded like it wanted out of his chest. When he finally dared, he pushed his sight outward, but only a little, cautious, afraid of what he might find. He hovered above the city in that mental space, looking down through a haze of lingering moonlight. The world below had gone dark again. Streetlights dead, windows black, Rancho swallowed whole by the night. He couldn't look at Ghent, not yet. Even when he avoided the man, Jake could feel him, a distant pressure at the edge of his thoughts. He turned his gaze elsewhere, to the apartment that should have been alive with laughter and music, but it was a hollow shell, silent, colorless, and cold. Dirt scattered across the carpet from a broken planter, a red and white crystalline gauntlet lying discarded on the floor. The echo of what had happened still clung to the walls with oppressive silence. Jake's stomach turned. He didn't want to see more, but he couldn't stop. He blinked tears away and took a long, shaking breath. He needed a plan. He needed something. Instead, he found exhaustion. His limbs trembled with it, his mind fogged by it. Sleep hovered close, seductive and deadly. He knew if he closed his eyes, the dark might claim him too. He pulled on a sweatshirt and shoes, slow and silent, and sat for a moment on the edge of his bed, staring at his hands. Wished for courage, or maybe a reason to stop. But then he felt Ghent. The man's presence pressed in on him, heavy as a cloud, pulsing with glee. Jake hated that he could sense it, hated that he understood it. The detective's satisfaction oozed through the connection like oil through water. Jake didn't want to look. He had to. He forced his mind eye open to the man. Ghent sat in his office, the picture of normalcy. Eyes straight, flashlight propped against a folder, flipping through files one by one. His smile was thin and hungry, curling wider with each new name and photograph. Jake's breath caught. He wanted to scream, but instead watched, frozen, until the detective stopped and stared back at him. "I guess it's going to be a race, Jacob." Ghent's voice slithered through the air, sing-song and cheerful. "Let's see if you can catch him before I do." The detective snapped the file shut. Jake's focus whipped to it. He tried to memorize every detail, the address, the photo, the name, but it all blurred together, like ink running in the rain. He didn't see an address or the name, but he knew the face. It was the man that had spoken to him through his sight, the man outside the bagel shop who he couldn't ever find again. He sent his mind scattering through the city, searching every block, every building, 100 eyes looking, none seeing. He couldn't stay still any longer. He grabbed his bike from the garage, the door open to keep from waking his family, and launched it into the dawn. Cold air bit his face. His legs pumped hard, faster than sense or reason. He didn't know where to go, only that he had to move. The first light of morning broke across the rooftops as he sped towards downtown, towards the bagel shop, towards hope. He didn't believe he'd get there first, but he had to try. Ghent's cruiser was already on the highway, tires rolling with horrible swiftness. The city flickered back to life as Jake rode. Street lamps buzzed awake, signs lit up, power returned to Rancho, to everyone but him. His thoughts were fractured, 1,000 fragments searching for a man whose face was burned into his memory. Come on, each breath sinking with the spin of his pedals. Ghent's car veered off the highway into a narrow neighborhood, one Jake knew too well. Jake swerved onto a side street, chest heaving, vision split across dozens of scenes as he searched the area. Every heartbeat felt like borrowed time. Then he saw it, an apartment complex. Inoffensive beige, just on the outskirts of downtown. Ghent's cruiser idled out front, lights off. The detective climbed the stairs, calm as ever, each step deliberate. Jake skidded to a stop, dropping his bike in the middle of the street, his lungs burned, his eyes stung. He forced his sight into the building. Floor to floor, door to door, it was all strangers, empty units, dead ends, nothing. Ghent paused halfway down the breezeway, his silhouette framed in the gray light of morning. He knocked on a door. Jake drew a sharp, panicked breath, the kind you take when you already know that you're too late. All the helplessness of the previous night flooded back into him as he stood frozen, waiting to witness the end of another man. Chapter 37. Waking Up. Aaron's eyes snapped open to a golden flicker of sunrise cutting through the blinds. For a disorienting second, he thought he'd overslept, but no. And he felt alive. No pounding headache, no dull ache behind the eyes, just light, breath, and clarity. He sat up and laughed quietly to himself, the sound startling him. It had been a long time since laughter came easy. He swung his legs out of bed, catching the cool floor against his bare feet, and finding it oddly refreshing. The coffee pot gurgled to life while he showered. The water ran colder than usual, but he didn't mind. It felt like a dare. The chill hit his skin, and instead of flinching, he smiled. He felt awake in every cell of his body. By the time he was dressed, the smell of coffee filled the apartment. He took a long sip, too hot, and he hissed through his teeth before laughing again. He almost checked his email, thought better of it, and checked the time instead. The phone screen was flooded with notifications, but he ignored them all. Later, he thought, today is going to be my day. The tire on his car was still flat, sitting there like a bad memory. He stared at it, shrugged, and then pulled his bike from the rack. The air was sharp and clean as he pedaled through quiet streets, storefronts still half asleep, morning light bouncing off of windows. He passed a few blinking traffic lights. Half the city was recovered from the power outage that had hit overnight. The ride should have felt long, but it didn't. He was gliding, legs pumping, lungs open, his mind clear. By the time he reached the office, he was smiling for no reason at all. Inside, the place was nearly deserted. A few screens still booting, the faint hum of generators filling the silence. Most of Ranto's team had stayed home, and the rest of the floor was ghostly quiet. He could hear his own footsteps echoing off the cubicle walls. It felt like he had the whole place to himself. Aaron dropped his bag, cracked his knuckles, and dove in. Code poured out of him, clean, efficient, confident. By noon, he'd finished everything due for the week. He leaned back in his chair, watching the little green check marks line up in a perfect row. No coffee, no rush, just results. He laughed again, softly this time. It felt earned. He grabbed a bag of chips and a candy bar from the cafeteria, ate while scrolling through and emptying his inbox. The power outage meant no new tasks, no interruptions. It was quiet work in a quiet world, and for once, that was exactly what he needed. By 5, he was done. Done. Ahead of schedule, on top of his life. He couldn't remember the last time he'd left the building while the sun was still shining. The ride across town was easy. The air was warm, wind behind him, the smell of pine and asphalt rolling by like a memory. He felt lighter than he had in years. "Emily!" he called the moment he opened the front door. She was buried in the couch, surrounded by half-folded boxes and the scent of packing tape. "How do you not have a cell phone yet?" she shot back, tired but grinning. "I have one." Aaron tossed it to her. "It works fine." Emily caught it, glanced down, and whistled. 200 notifications? Seriously? She tossed it back. He shrugged. "Let's go to dinner. I'm in too good of a mood to waste it cooking." "If you're paying, I'm in," she said, stretching. "Do I need to change?" He looked her over, loose sweats, dust on her shirt, hair half tamed. He smiled. "Nah, you'll take forever. Let's just go." Emily rolled her eyes, but slipped on her shoes. "Something not too public then, please." Aaron grinned and held the door open for her. "Don't worry," he said. I'm feeling lucky today. Chapter 38, Impossible Magic. Vuet had walked the human world for months. Her magic was only a dim echo of what it once had been, an ember smothered beneath layers of impossibly fine craft. Every thread of power, every ripple of energy was bound into perfect order. The world itself drank from her like a thirsty beast, stealing bits of her essence to feed its endless cycle. The structure of it was mesmerizing. Every current of life bound in seamless exchange, energy feeding energy in eternal rhythm, was a masterpiece of design, a tapestry so tightly woven that even she, the last of her kind, could not slip a needle through its weave. She had anchored herself in 100 worlds before. She had bent their energies to her will, mended their fractures, even remade herself from the edge of annihilation. Yet here, every attempt to touch the deeper power was swallowed whole. Her craft, impossible by most standards, meant nothing against the artistry of this place. It humbled her. It infuriated her. Her disguise, at least, cost little to maintain. The human form she'd woven around herself felt thin and awkward but stable. And though she could not yet command the world's magic, it crept into her all the same, slowly, subtly, seeding her bones with its own quiet rhythm. She couldn't shape it, but it was changing her from within. It was a mystery she admired almost as much as she despised it. Still, her fascination was withering into contempt. The world itself was breathtaking, its skies, its oceans, its endless intrigues, but the people within it, they were blind. They prayed to invisible gods while ignoring the miracles they built with their own hands. They fought to survive while standing upon mountains of abundance. They idolized suffering and called it virtue. It was as if they had declared war on joy itself. And the more she saw, the more she understood Ryland's disgust. He had told her this world would test her faith, had hated that he was right. She wanted to love it, to see its potential, but each passing day made that harder. Their world was magnificent, its inhabitants were miserable. Even their magic, this perfect, invisible lattice of creation, had been reduced to nothing but background noise. She missed her true body too, missed the grace of her movements, the effortless power that came with every step. His human shell was dull by comparison, a sluggish machine of fragile muscles and bone. Ryland's continued use of his own human form baffled her. A Tor of his caliber could perfect every fiber of his being, yet he kept the frail shape as though clinging to some relic of guilt or sentiment. None of it helped her find her way back to Sanctuary. None of it mattered, and she remained trapped. So she walked, because walking, at least, was motion. She wandered cities of towering glass, forests that breathed like sleeping giants, oceans that sang with living thunder. She watched lights flicker across skylines like constellations reborn, and she wondered why no one stopped to weep at the beauty of it. Not one person knelt in awe. Not one cried at the sight of the miraculous. They looked at their world and saw nothing, or worse, saw only the small rot on a perfectly ripe fruit. It was sickness, she decided, a blindness so complete it infected even her. She could feel it dulling her too, stealing her wonder by inches. She despised herself for letting it happen. Ryland, she whispered bitterly to the trees as she walked the edge of the sleeping city. You stranded me here, and somehow I'm lonelier than I ever was on my own empty world. The forest didn't answer. Only the sound of water filled the air, the soft murmur of a stream winding toward the sea. Vuet followed it, letting her bare feet sink into the mud, her senses tracing the heartbeat of the world. She reached out with her spirit, brushing against the threads of power beneath the surface, perfect and unyielding. A living mural of creation, so flawless it mocked her every attempt to touch it. She wept openly then, overwhelmed by its beauty and the pain of her own failure. Something wrong? The voice came from nowhere and everywhere. Vuet froze, scanning the trees, her pulse thundering. No one was there. She swallowed hard, trembling. The voice had followed her before, back in the long, lonely years before Sanctuary. She'd thought it would be silent forever. You're looking too close, it said. Her breath caught. The voice always spoke truths she already knew but refused to hear. You have to look bigger, further away. Vuet knelt by the water, splashing her face. The cold felt strange against her smooth skin, unfamiliar after so long with fur. The sensation grounded her. She took a long breath against a fall, then sat again on a fallen log, eyes closed, reaching inward. The tapestry of the world lay before her mind's eye, flawless and unbroken. Every strand in perfect harmony, a rainbow of power woven into a single eternal thread. Too close, the voice repeated. She frowned. There is no further away. You're impossible, it said softly, and for once the words didn't sound cruel, faintly through her tears. Yes, she whispered, I am. She inhaled, letting the air fill her lungs, and began one of the meditations taught by the Master Tor. Slow, measured breath to 10. Release without count. Her vision swam, the world tilted and blurred until she felt the weight of her body dissolve. The dizziness gave way to calm, then clarity. She had been staring too close, at the brush strokes instead of the painting. Here, in the stillness beyond herself, she could finally see the broader shape, the contours of worlds, the layers beneath the masterpiece. And there, just past the horizon of perception, she felt it. Sanctuary's faint glow, waiting for her. Vuet reached out, not with her body, not even with her magic, but with her understanding. She didn't pierce the tapestry, she simply stepped back from it. The energies responded like a sigh, folding around her, pulling her through the spaces between the threads. She was home. The scent of ozone and starlight filled her senses as her feet touched the familiar floor of her chambers in Sanctuary. Ace, Ryland's voice said from behind her. Not bad at all. Vuet didn't need to look to see his smirk. The pride in his voice said it all. Chapter 39. The Work. A decade of toil, Vuet. Ryland straightened from his desk and stretched, his joints cracking with the sound of long neglect. The Shapers found our world. They're swimming over it now, studying it like ants dissecting a corpse. Vuet turned towards him, eyes widening. Her latest body, a deliberate compromise between her true form and a human one, moved with eerie grace. The fur on her hands and forearms was gone, leaving sleek, smooth skin. Her fingers, now finer and longer, danced with a jeweler's precision over the crystalline instruments scattered before her. Her face still bore her canine heritage, her proportions strange and elegant, her whiskers twitching as she considered what it meant for Ryland to see everything happening across a world. She said nothing. Some acts of power were beyond words. They'll study it for another 5, maybe 10 years, Ryland said, voice distant. Every detail, every variable, planning their invasion, weaving their anchors, mapping how they'll drink its power dry. He inhaled sharply, his gaze fixed somewhere far away, perhaps seeing the unfolding ruin in his mind. Vuet returned to her task wordlessly, a fragile glass housing filled with a dozen threads of glowing essence. Her movements were methodical, but her nose twitched at the sterile air of their lab. The scentless stillness unsettled her. This world between worlds had long stopped feeling alive. It wasn't her home anymore. Perhaps it never had been. But, Ryland said suddenly, his voice hardening, I need you to protect the children. She froze. You want me to what? The Shapers can't know what I've done. They can't find a trace of our interference before their plan is in motion. He turned to face her fully, his eyes burned with conviction and something else, desperation. You want me to be human again? She asked, her tone half disbelief, half disgust. Ryland hesitated. The magic there is unraveling, less structured. You'll have more freedom to pull from loose threads of power. Vuet gave a low, humorless growl. Threads of power are not the oceans we command in Sanctuary, nor the rivers we weave here. Compared to the awakened of Earth, you'll be as close to divine as any being can be. Vuet's eyes narrowed. And you and I both know how quickly and certainly gods die. Ryland looked down. The silence that followed was heavy with old grief. Finally, Vuet spoke again, her tone quiet but certain. You know I'll go. This cause means too much to us both. She turned back to her instruments, pretending to ignore the pain in her chest. Ryland lingered. We could hire another, he said softly, hopefully. Vuet scoffed. Someone who doesn't understand our purpose, who will sell us out to the Shapers the moment fear outweighs loyalty? She shook her head. You're asking to buy betrayal. The Shapers are everywhere, Ryland. 10% of Sanctuary's people already bear their mark. They crawl through our streets like spoiled children. She clenched her jaw. In truth, the idea of leaving made her stomach twist. Every world she had loved, she had watched die. How many more would she be asked to bury? I have no desire to watch another world unravel, she whispered. Don't know what I'll do if this one fails. It won't, Ryland answered. Ryland's answer came quick, too quick. His certainty was the kind that dared the universe to prove him wrong. We'll end their corruption. This is how we fight back. Vuet only shook her head. You talk about inevitability as if it's a choice. Then let's choose, he said simply. She stared at him, seeing the cracks behind his confidence. They both knew the truth. Every piece of their plan was a theory, hope disguised as science, fate masquerading as logic. We should bring a seer, Vuet said finally. What would you do if they told us we were to fail? She glared. Would you give up? He asked again. You know I wouldn't, she hissed. Then why ask a question that changes nothing? Vuet wanted to argue, but words refused to come. He was right. Even if they assembled 1,000 seers, 1,000 Tor, all they would gain was endless debate, hypothesis without progress, division without action. We could try something else, she muttered weakly, already knowing the answer. Ryland's tone softened. Tell me what else we can try. You know I don't know. I do, Ryland said. He crossed to her, kneeling beside her stool. The two of us are doing the only thing we can. His voice cracked with the weight of belief. We're giving this world, and the next, a chance to stand against the Shapers, a chance to survive. We're fighting to undo my mistakes, to save one world. Vuet's eyes shimmered. A single world we set in the path of disaster, she murmured. Didn't see another way, Ryland said quietly. All I could do was make sure I had a chance. Vuet exhaled slowly, her shoulders trembling. They had fought this argument for years, cycling through every logic, every justification, every plea. Nothing changed. They were two souls standing against a machine that spanned hundreds, perhaps thousands of worlds at this point. A force too vast to map, too cunning to reason with. A force more powerful than a god. Even Sanctuary's brightest minds couldn't chart the full might of the Shaper's influence. I know, Vuet said finally, her voice small. I'm sorry, Ryland. I'm just tired. So tired. I just want this to matter. I need this to matter. Ryland rose and wrapped her in his arms. It will, he said. We're closer than ever, Vuet. Just hold on a little longer. And for a long time, she didn't answer. She simply leaned against him, her heartbeat slow and heavy. I'll hold on, she said at last, her voice almost a whisper. But I'm not sure how much longer I can believe. Chapter 40. Lost the Path. Jake stood in the middle of the street beside his bike until a car horn jolted him back into reality. He jumped, dragged the bike to the curb, heart pounding, frustration clawing at him. Bent had found another mage, was hunting him now, and Jake couldn't even locate the man. He knew his face, he knew his name. It never failed to find someone before. Now he was lost, forced to watch from the sidelines as one battle after another ended in horror. Every defeat made Ghent stronger, and Jake could feel that strength coiling in his mind like a parasite. He had to find the next victim first. Didn't know why he couldn't. Was Ghent blocking him somehow, hiding the man? That didn't feel right, but Jake had no better answer. Every time he tried to focus on one of Ghent's victims, the world turned black and cold, as if they still existed somewhere frozen in the endless darkness. The thought made Jake gag, bent double, vomiting into the gutter. Nothing came up except a thick, painful string of bile that clung to his throat and refused to leave. He coughed until he could breathe again, trembling and dizzy. He wiped his mouth, trying to think straight. He'd run away after another nightmare. He hadn't eaten, hadn't slept, hadn't gone to class in days. A police detective turned monster was murdering people across the city, and he was the only one who knew. The only one who could even see what was happening. And Ghent, smiling, immortal, unstoppable, was hunting him too. Jake's mind flickered through faces faster than he could breathe. Who could help him? Who had power enough to matter? He didn't even know where to start. Then an image locked into focus. Liz, the woman from the wine bar, curled up in the driver's seat of her car, wrapped in a sweatshirt, asleep beneath a soft gray dawn. Her car parked on a trailhead just outside of town. Jake spun his bike around so fast tires squealed against pavement. He didn't think, didn't breathe, just pedaled. Harder than he ever had. The wind burned his eyes and froze the tears to his face as he raced for the bike path. He didn't know if he could save her, but he refused to lose another one without trying.